Hello everyone, good afternoon and a very warm welcome to our webinar today, the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll. This is one of the sessions that we're running as part of our Spring Clean 2024 digital badge, and I will tell you more about earning that badge later on in the session. So my name's Duncan, I'll be hosting and presenting the webinar today, and I am joined by my colleagues Alice, Paddy and Ollie, standing by in the background, ready and waiting to answer your questions. Let's now take a look at what we're going to cover in the webinar. So we're going to begin with a very brief introduction to national minimum and living wage legislation, confirming the current minimum wage rates and also providing some information on where you can find further support with the legislation side of things. We're then going to demonstrate how to set up the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll. So I'll be taking you through setting up the pay elements and applying that check to the relevant employees. We'll then go and process some employees who receive the minimum wage, and you'll see how the minimum wage check will alert you if it detects that the minimum wage is not being paid. And then once we've been through a couple of demonstrations, we'll finish off with a quiz just for fun, 4 questions to test your knowledge, and we'll be using our polling feature so you can join in and interact during that part of the webinar. I'll run through the further support that's available, and we'll try and stick around at the end to give you the chance to ask any final questions and to maybe copy and paste any questions and answers that you might want to keep. So let's get things started with a quick look at national minimum and living wage legislation. And the first thing I want to do is just to explain the difference between those two terms. So the national minimum wage is the minimum pay per hour that employees are entitled to receive, whereas the national living wage is just a different name for the highest rate of minimum wage, which is what employees will need to be paid if they are over the age of 21. Now, that was a recent change to legislation. The national living wage used to be for employees aged 23 and older, but with effect from the 1st of April, employees 21 and over are now entitled to that highest rate of minimum wage, the national living wage. Now, looking at the current rates, and these came into force on the 1st of April, the living wage for employees aged 21 and over is £11.44 per hour. The minimum wage for employees aged 18 to 20 is £8.60 per hour. And minimum wage for under 18s is £6.40 per hour. And that will apply for all employees from school leaving age upwards. The apprenticeship rate is £6.40 per hour, and that is the minimum wage for apprentices if they are under 19, and also for apprentices 19 and older in the first year of their apprenticeship. So if they are on an apprenticeship contract or a government-backed apprenticeship scheme and they are 19 or older, once they've completed the first year of that apprenticeship, they then move on to the minimum or living wage depending on their age. So you can find more information on minimum wage legislation either from the gov.uk website or the ACAS website. And if you download the handout, you'll find some useful links towards the end, which will direct you to some more detail on how it all works. Now, what we're going to focus on in the webinar today is setting up the minimum wage check. So we're going to have a look at where the minimum wage legislation is stored, which gives you a handy way of checking the minimum wage rates for your employees. And then we'll look at a couple of setup steps that you can use for hourly paid employees so that you can automatically check if they're being paid the minimum wage as part of your pay run. So first thing I want to show you is the legislation settings. So I'm just going to bring the slides down at this point. And you'll see that I'm already logged into my Sage Payroll. Now, to find the legislation, if you start by clicking Company here in the bottom left corner, you can then click onto the Legislation option under Tasks, and this will show you the legislation settings for 2024 to 25. Now, across the top here, we have a minimum wage tab. So if you click onto minimum wage, you can see the minimum or living wage rates for the current tax year, 2024 to 25. And there are now just the 3 bands. So we've got 16 and 17-year-olds getting £6.40 per hour. You've got your 18 to 20s on the £8.60, and you've got your 21 and olders on £11.44. And it also shows the apprenticeship rate here at the bottom. So if you don't pay your staff hourly, but you just want a reminder of what the minimum hourly rates are for each age range, this is a great place to find that information rather than having to find it on the gov.uk website. So company legislation on the minimum wage tab, you can check the rates from here. Now, these are also the settings that the minimum wage check will use to verify that your hourly paid employees are being paid enough. And you just need to make sure that you haven't opted out of minimum and living wage validation. So if you're going to use this feature, just make sure that this tick box at the bottom has not been selected. So those are your legislation settings. What I want to show you next is setting up the minimum wage check itself. So essentially there are two steps you need to complete. So first of all, you'll need to review your pay elements and ensure that the relevant payments are included in the minimum wage check. And you'll be able to include both the hours and rate, or for a non-hourly payment. So for example, if you pay someone an hourly rate plus commission, you can include the commission payment in the calculation as the value only. And then once you've set up your pay elements, you'll need to apply the minimum or living wage check to your employees. So there's a checkbox in the employee record, and I'll also show you how you can do this using global changes. So let's take a look at those steps now. Just jumping back to the demo. So we're going to stick on the company tasks to start with, and I'm going to select pay elements from the list of tasks on the left-hand side. And you'll see for today's demo, I just have the 4 payments set up, and all of my employees are paid hourly. So they get a basic hourly rate. Some of them do get additional payments. Now to view the settings for the pay elements, you would just need to edit the payment selected. And then the settings for the minimum or living wage check are these checkboxes here towards the bottom. So I have a basic payment, which is used to pay basic hours. I've set a default rate at the current national living wage. So that's the rate that would be used for any new employees that I assign the payment to. But with it being a variable payment, the rate can be varied either in the employee record or in the enter payments screen. And for this particular payment, I'm including both the value and the hours in the minimum wage calculation. So this payment will be used to count the number of hours worked in the period, and the total value of these payments will be used to calculate the kind of average hourly rate. Now looking at my other payments, I do have one here for overtime. Now this is set up as a factored payment because it includes what's known as a premium element, and under minimum wage legislation, premium elements are not included when calculating minimum wage. So if I click onto edit for this particular payment, it is an hourly payment. It's at 1.5 times the base payment rate. So we're including the value and hours in the minimum wage calculation, but we've also flagged this as including the premium element. So with this being time and a half, the kind of and a half section of this payment is disregarded when calculating minimum wage. So that's all in line with minimum wage legislation. So that's why we've got the 3 boxes ticked for this factored payment. I do have an employee that receives commission on top of their basic, which forms part of their earnings. But with commission not being an hourly payment, for this one, I've only included the value in the minimum wage calculation. So it's not recording hours worked. So we haven't got that second box ticked. And I also have this 4th payment, which I'm going to use in the event that I might need to make a top up to an employee's pay, which I've called minimum living wage top up. And for this one, again, it's not recording hours worked. I'm just going to include the value in the calculation. Now, you do have similar settings for deductions. They're not used as much, but you can include deductions in the minimum wage calculation. So an example might be if you've got unpaid hours that you record as a pre-tax, pre-NI deduction, you might include that in minimum wage calculations, but generally it is just the payments that would be involved. A quick tip for you as well, if you have a lot of pay elements and you want a quicker way of checking the settings, you can run the payment types report. So if you go into the reports option above the employee list, go to the company folder here on the left-hand side, and then scroll down and look for payment types. What this report will show you is a list of all of the payments set up, as well as the settings for each payment. So I can very quickly see that for minimum wage, I've got a couple of hourly payments included, and the rate or the amount of pay for all 4 payments is being included in the calculation, with my overtime being that premium element. So just a handy way of checking the settings rather than going through one by one. So I'm happy with the pay element settings there. And the next thing I need to do is to apply the minimum wage check to my employees. So you can do it in the individual employee record. So I'll just show you this with employee 1. If I go into the record and click onto employment, I can then come down to pay elements here at the bottom, and you'll see there's a tick box to apply the minimum or living wage check. So I've got that selected already for this first employee. And if you wanted to do the same for all employees, so if I swap my selection to highlight the other 4, you can also apply this setting using global changes. So you can go to tasks, down to global changes, go to the payments section, and then you've got the option to set the minimum or living wage flag. So I'll just run through this now. It's going to set it for the 4 selected employees. When I click yes to proceed, it's telling me that those 4 employees were successfully updated. So I now have all of my employees included in the minimum wage check. And there is another handy report that you might want to run for these employees. So I'll just show you that now. If I go into the reports option, and then the employee folder this time on the left-hand side, we do have a minimum wage employees report. So this is listed alphabetically. You could add it to your favorites if you find it a useful report. And for anyone who is included in the minimum wage check, this report will display their date of birth and age, and it'll tell you what minimum wage band they fall into. Now, since the change on the 1st of April, the minimum wage band 21 to 22 is the same as 23 and older. So living wage these days is payable to anyone from the age of 21 and above. But I do have an apprentice here on apprentice rate. So just to show you the apprentice settings, if you do employ apprentices, what you would need to do to verify they're being paid the correct minimum wage as an apprentice is you go onto the employment tab in their record, and you would complete the apprentice details down here. So when I click on apprentice, the apprenticeship started on the 24th of April 2023 for this employee. So we can see that they are coming up to a year. So they'll be entering the 2nd year of their apprenticeship soon, and that will have an effect on the minimum wage that they need to receive. So that's how you flag someone as an apprentice. You would enter apprenticeship details in their employee record. So that is our setup complete. Just to recap those 2 steps. Step 1 was setting your pay elements to be included in minimum and living wage calculations. So you've got the checkboxes and the pay element settings. You also had that payment types report as a quick way of checking pay element settings. And then applying the minimum or living wage check can be done either in the employee record, as per the screenshot that you see in there, or by using global changes, as I just showed you in the demo. So now that this is set up, I can start to process payroll for these employees. And I'd like to show you some scenarios that I've created that will generate warnings and alerts to tell me when I am paying below the minimum wage. So the way that this is going to work is we're going to go and enter the payments. And remember, these need to be hourly paid employees. So it won't work with a salary because there's no way of verifying the number of hours worked and working out the hourly rate. But if they're paid hourly, a message will appear when you save their payments if it's detected they are paid below minimum wage. And if you have variable pay elements set up, it'll also give you the option to automatically adjust the rate of pay. The default rates, so if someone has moved into the next band, if they've reached a milestone birthday, for example, those can be updated in the employee record and also in the pay element settings. So each April, when the minimum wage goes up, you might want to update your company pay element defaults as well. So let's take a look at some of this in action. Just going back to our demo. So I'm going to go to my payroll tasks. And for this demo, I'm going to work with one employee at a time, just explaining a number of different scenarios that I've created. So my process date is this Friday, the 19th of April. And I'm starting with a regular employee. They just have one payment for their hourly rate. They are over 21, so they're entitled to national living wage. And when I go into the enter payment screen, we can see that they've worked 40 hours and their rate of pay is £11.44. So if I save these payments as they are now, there's no alerts because it has detected that this employee is being paid at least their minimum wage. But let's just make a quick change to the rate. Let's pay them £11.40, which is 4 pence below the national living wage. If I then try to save the payments, this is when we get the alert. So I'm being told that the employee is being paid less than their minimum wage. And because I'm using a variable payment, it's asking me to select a payment to adjust. And it's then giving me an adjust option. So if I adjust the basic, you can see it has increased it to £11.44, so that this employee is being paid the correct amount. So that's the simplest case. The next employee I've set up to receive some overtime at time and a half, and that overtime includes a premium element. So let's just go into the enter payment screen for this employee. And again, they are aged over 21, so they should be entitled to the national living wage. And currently the way I've got this set up is 40 hours at a basic rate of £11 per hour and 10 hours of overtime at time and a half, which is £16.50 per hour. Now, before I save these payments, I'm just going to show you a quick calculation. So I'm going to bring up my calculator here on the left-hand side. So I can see that their total gross pay at the moment is £605. And I know that in total, they have worked 50 hours. So I'm going to divide that by 50. And that is giving us what appears to be the average hourly rate of £12.10. And that is above that £11.44 for the national living wage. However, when I save these payments, you can see I'm being prompted that they're being paid less than the minimum wage. And the reason for that is that the overtime payment is a premium, includes a premium element. So the extra amount they get for time and a half is disregarded from the calculation. So they are technically being paid below the minimum wage, and I'm being prompted to adjust their basic pay. When I click on to adjust, you'll see that their basic rate has gone up to £11.44 and the overtime rate has adjusted accordingly because it's a factored payment, it's linked to this base rate, so that goes up to £7.16. So they are now being paid the correct minimum wage for their age. So moving on to my third employee, this is an employee who has recently had a milestone birthday. So I'll just show you in the employee record their date of birth. So that was the 13th of April, 2003. So just turned 21. Now this does mean that I need to change their NI category because they're no longer in the 16 to 20 bracket for national insurance. So I'm going to move them from category M onto standard rate contributions. But it would also mean that they're going to need a higher minimum wage. So let's go into the enter payment screen for this one. So currently I've got their rate set as £8.60, which is minimum wage for aged 18 to 20. When I click onto save/next, I'm being prompted to adjust the basic pay. And if I click adjust, I can see the amount that it should go up to. So obviously this employee is now over 21, so they should be getting that living wage from this point onwards. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to jump into their employee record by clicking this employee icon at the top. I'm going to go to employment and then pay elements. And I'm going to update their default rate to be the living wage rate of £11.44. So I'm going to save that change, save the record, and we've now set their default to what it should be for an employee over 21. So a couple of other examples to show you. My next employee is commission-based, so they do get a basic hourly rate, but we also have a target for their commission, which should take them above the minimum wage. So let's go into the enter payment screen for this one. So you can see they've worked 40 hours this week, and we give them a basic rate of £10 an hour. I've also got commission. So remember, with that commission payment, I've included the rate in the enter payments, the amount of the payment, in the calculation, but I didn't include the hours because it doesn't represent an hour worked. So at the moment, they're getting £500 in total. If I bring my calculator back up, I'll do the 500 divided by the 40 hours they've worked. It's looking like they're above minimum wage. And when I click on save/next, you can see that there aren't any alerts because the check has come to the same conclusion. But let's imagine they didn't earn quite as much commission as that. So let's pop them down to maybe £50 commission and then save the payments. You can see now that we are being triggered to make an adjustment. So it's asking us, do we want to adjust the basic or the commission payment? And actually in this scenario, I don't really want to change either of those. I want to use a separate payment line on the payslip just to make clear to the employee that we've topped up their wage to take them up to minimum wage, and it still represents the basic and the commission that they've earned. So for this one, I'm just going to click cancel. And if you're wondering why that is below, I mean, we can do the manual calculation. £450 divided by the 40 hours worked is £11.25. So that is below minimum wage. But for this one, I'm going to add another payment line. So the one that I created for the minimum or living wage top up. Now I have entered a default of 1 hour or 1 unit for this payment, but it is only the rate that's included in the minimum wage check. And it just means that when I save this payment, I can now choose to adjust my minimum wage top up pay. When I do that, you can see it's added an extra £7.60 to the basic and commission. So that gross pay, £457.60, 40 hours, is now at national living wage. So last one I want to show you is an apprentice. So I've already showed you the apprenticeship details, but the employee is age 22. So if they weren't an apprentice in their first year, they would be entitled to national living wage. But they are in their first year of the apprenticeship. I'm currently paying them the apprenticeship rate of £6.40. When I save those payments, no problem with that. That is the minimum they should be receiving. So all of those adjustments that have been made have been saved for the current pay period. But when we move on to the next one, you will see that it reverts back to what was originally entered. So if there are any permanent adjustments to rates you need to make, those need to be recorded in the enter payment screen as well. So what I'll just do is I'll update the records for this week. And I'm just going to set my process date forward a week. And we'll see what happens when we go in to enter the payments for the next period. So can you see here it has retained the £11.40 that I changed this rate to, which would trigger an alert because it's below minimum wage. So I'm actually going to cancel out and I'm going to set that to £11.44 because I know that's what it should be. And I've been able to save that without any alerts. And similarly for this employee, it's put their basic rate back to the £11, but I do want to change that because it should be £11.44. So I'm just going to go into their record and I'm going to update the default rate here. And that way, this is what will be used by default moving forward. Again, the employee that had the milestone birthday, it's gone back to what their previous rate and enter payments was. So I'm going to update it in this area so that it retains this moving forward. And the employee on commission, I'm going to remove the top up. So they got £55 commission this week, but it's still just below the minimum wage. So I'm being prompted to make an adjustment. And for this one, I'm going to adjust the same payment I did before. And you can see there, it has added £2.60 to bring them up to minimum wage. Finally, we have our apprentice. Now, they started their apprenticeship just over a year ago. So at this point, when I'm saving their payments, it is detected that they're being paid less than the minimum wage. So if I ask it to adjust the basic, you can see that has now gone up to the living wage. So all of my staff are now 21 or older. And because this apprentice is in their second year of the apprenticeship and they're over 19, they should now get the minimum wage according to their age. So that's why it's increased here. And again, if I wanted to set the default, I can do so here in the employee record. So that is about it for the minimum wage check. Not too much to it, but just to recap what you've seen there in the demonstration. So for the hourly paid employees included in the minimum wage check, if it detects that they're being paid less than the minimum hourly rate, you will see the prompt. Now, if you choose a payment to adjust, if you've got fixed or global payments, you will need to adjust the rate within the employee record or the company pay element. And the default rates, as you've seen, can be updated in the employee record. But if you have done an automatic adjustment like I did, using enter payments will revert back to what they were the previous period before the adjustment. So again, you need to overwrite those with the correct higher rates moving forward. But that is the minimum wage check in Sage 50 Payroll. And as promised, in the handout, if you download this, we do have some useful links on how all of this works. So in our Sage knowledge base, you've got some articles on applying the minimum wage check, reviewing your pay element settings, and how to update your employees' rates if you need to do so. I've got some really handy links to the gov.uk guidance. So we've got the basic article and then the in-depth guidance from gov.uk, and also information available from ACAS. Follow the links on that screen. But that's not all. As promised, we do have a quiz for you. So if you want to test your knowledge on what you've learned in the session today, do stick around for these next 4 questions. I'm going to be using the poll-in feature so that you can interact with this quiz. So it's a multiple choice quiz. We will share the overall results of each question, but we won't name and shame anyone that got the wrong answers. So you'll just see the overall results. And we are going to start with question 1. Nice, easy starter for 10, which is, at what age does an employee get the national living wage? So I have given you 4 options to choose from. Do employees get the national living wage at the age of 18? Is it the age of 21? Is it aged 23? Or is it aged? So to vote in the poll, you select your answer and you submit that through. And once we've had the majority of the votes cast, I will share with you the overall results. So for national living wage, should an employee be 18 and over, 21 and over, 23 and over, or 25 and over? So it's looking pretty positive so far. And we've had about 80% of the vote goes that down. And let's see how you got on. I'm going to share the results. And I'm happy to say that 93% of you got that question right. So national living wage is payable for employees aged 21 and above. So there is still a minimum wage for employees under 21, Before the 1st of April this year, it was 23 and older. And even earlier, a few years ago, national living wage used to be for age 25 and over. But the correct answer since the 1st of April is 21. So well done if you got that question right. On to question 2. So this one is, what is the current national living wage? So what rate of pay is the living wage? Is it £8.60 per hour? Is it £10.42? Is it £11.44? Or is it £12.50? So you can vote in the poll, choose the answer that you think is correct. You'll have seen this rate in the demos, as pretty much all of my employees were entitled to receive it. So is current national living wage £8.60, £10.42, £11.44, or £12.50? So we have had 80% of the vote in. I'm going to close that one down. Shall we see if you got it right? So there we have it. 97% of you got that correct. The national living wage from the 1st of April 2024 is £11.44 per hour. So the £8.60 is the minimum wage for 18 to 20s. £10.42 was living wage last year. £12.50, just a made-up answer. So well done to the 97% who got that right. On to question 3. So we saw this at the very start of the webinar. Where can you find the current minimum wage rates in Sage 50 Payroll? So where could you look in your payroll software if you wanted to check the current minimum and living wage rates? Is it within the Enter Payment screen? Would you find them within the employee record in the Pay Elements section? Would you find them in Company and Pay Elements? Or can you find the minimum wage rates within Company and Legislation? So again, we'll keep this open until we've had about 80% of the vote in. Where can you find current minimum wage rates, Enter Payments, Employee Record Pay Elements, Company Pay Elements, or Company Legislation? Going to close that one down. I might need to make these questions a bit harder. Let's share the results. So 93% of you are saying you can find them within Company and Legislation, and you are absolutely right. That is where the minimum wage legislation settings are found, which is what's used by the minimum wage check. So you can check the current minimums for those different age ranges. Company Pay Elements is where you can set your own default rates for pay elements. So you might see them there if you pay your employees the minimum wage, but that's just a value that you've entered. Same for the Employee Record Pay Elements and Enter Payments. So the correct answer there was Company and Legislation. So one more for you. Again, this is another minimum wage check question. So when using the minimum wage check, what type of payment can be automatically adjusted? So is that type of payment a variable payment? Can you automatically adjust a fixed payment? Is it a global payment? Or is it a factored payment? So when using the minimum wage check, you get the alert up, what type of payment by clicking the adjust button. Variable, fixed, global, or factor. So this one's maybe a little bit tougher than the previous ones. Still got some good answers coming through. And we will close the poll at that point. Thank you for voting. Let's see how you got on then. So 10% fixed, 10% global, and 7% factor. And the correct answer there is variable payments. So when you set up your pay elements, if you set it as a variable status, it means that the rate can be adjusted within enter payments, and that is where the minimum wage check does the adjustment. So if you have a fixed payment, the rate are fixed in the employee record. So you'll be alerted if you're being paid less than the minimum wage, but you will need to change the rate yourself in the employee record. A global payment has its rate set at company level within company and pay elements. So again, you'll still be alerted if you've got an hourly global payment that's below minimum wage, but you would need to change that in company pay elements. And factor, it kind of does get adjusted automatically because it's linked to the base payment. So if you do adjust the variable base payment, the factor payment will adjust accordingly. So partial credit if you said factored. But that is the last question in your quiz. Well done to anyone that got 4 out of 4. As I say, it was just for fun. And that actually brings us to the end of the presentation. So what I did want to do is to let you know about the further support that's available and also give you the chance to look through the Q&A, maybe ask any final questions that you might have for our team, and to grab a copy of the handouts if you would like them. But in terms of further support, I just want to mention a bit more about our Spring Clean badge. So this is a digital badge that you can earn by attending at least 3 of the 5 webinars that we've scheduled for our Spring Clean season. So you've already attended one of them, Minimum Wage Check today. You may have been to Spring Clean Your Payroll the other day, but if you attend 3 out of the 5 live sessions, at least 3, you will receive a digital badge, which will be sent out towards the start of May. Other topics coming up include online payslips, report favourites and selections, HMRC secure mailbox, and we have got Spring Clean Your Payroll running again tomorrow if you wanted to join us for that one. So you can read more about what each webinar covers by selecting the Register Now button or by going to our website at sage.co.uk/webinars. So we'd love to see you at the other sessions, and you can even grab yourself a free digital badge. Other help is available via our online help centre, which you can access in Sage 50 Payroll by clicking on any of the help icons that you see, or from any browser, from any device, you can go to sage.co.uk/help and follow the links to Sage 50 Payroll. Within our help centre, you can search our knowledge base and read our support guides. There is a webinars link towards the top if you're interested in signing up to other sessions. You'll find various videos throughout the site. And if you do need to contact our support team for any reason, you can find contact details available as well. So really great resource. Get it bookmarked, sage.co.uk/help, and follow the links for Sage 50 Payroll. As well as that, we have Sage University, which is a great online resource, completely free for you to register and use. You can create your profile at sageu.com and then find your way to the Sage 50 Payroll learning path. So as well as our comprehensive e-learning courses, you can get certified by completing the online certification and exams, and you can also dip in and out of bite-sized learning on a range of payroll topics. So a great resource to brush up on your Sage 50 Payroll knowledge. So that's all your further support. We have got about 5 minutes remaining of the scheduled webinar, so we'll keep it open to continue answering as many questions as we can get round to. It is really your final chance to download the handouts, and also don't forget to copy and paste any questions and answers that you might want to keep hold of. We will be sending you a follow-up email later on today, which contains a link to the recording of today's webinar if you wanted to review any of what you've seen today. And at the point you exit the webinar, or when we close it down, you'll be invited to take our short feedback survey. And I'd really appreciate any thoughts that you have on the webinar, how this has helped you, and any suggestions that you might have perhaps for future webinar topics. So we do read all of your comments, and it does help us to keep these webinars relevant, up to date, and bring you what you would like to see. So if you wouldn't mind completing the survey, that would be really helpful. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to jump onto mute just to help out with any of the remaining questions. But when we're ready to close the session down, I'll come back to say goodbye and wrap things up. So I will speak to you all shortly. Hi again, everyone, and thank you so much for sending those questions through. I see you've kept the team busy, and it looks like we have sent through answers for the majority of your questions. So we are pretty much out of time now. So I just want to take this final opportunity to thank you all for attending. A big thank you to the helpers behind the scenes who have been answering your questions. Do take a minute to complete the survey when you exit the webinar if you could, and look out for that follow-up email arriving later today. So with that said, we're going to leave it there. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I do look forward to seeing you on some of our other Spring Clean webinars in the very near future. So goodbye for now.